May 7, 1945. Dawn. A misty airfield outside Flensburg, Germany. The wind carries the smell of gasoline and wet grass. A row of silent machines stretches toward the tree line. Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, even a few jets that look like they don't belong to this decade. Their canopies are fogged. Their fuselages are streaked with rain and soot. Not a single ground crewman in sight. A young British corporal walks across the field with his rifle hanging loose at his side. He moves slowly, almost unsure if something might jump out of fog. Behind him, a line of trucks rumbles forward. Their engines echo through the empty hangars, where half-disassembled fighters sit with tools still scattered around them. It looks like the mechanics stepped away for lunch and never came back. You can almost feel the stillness pressing on him. A few hours earlier, German officers surrendered this base without argument. Now the Allies are the first outsiders to see what the Luftwaffe left behind. Inside one hangar, a camouflage tarp hangs half off the frame of an aircraft unlike anything the corporal has seen before. Its wings sweep back at a sharp angle. Its landing gear looks strange. A clipboard sits on a nearby crate with scribbled notes in German about fuel mixtures, compressor tests, and something labeled HG2. He doesn't understand a word of it, but one thing is clear. This wasn't an ordinary fighter. Across Europe, the same scene is playing out. In Schleswig, in Bavaria, on old Luftwaffe bases hidden deep in forests. British, American, and Soviet troops walk into aircraft shelters and find the ghosts of a defeated air force. Some planes are neatly parked like museum pieces. Others lie broken in flooded craters where their crews try to destroy the evidence. The Allies came expecting surrender. What they found was something else, a treasure trove of technology far ahead of anything they had in service. Jet engines, aerodynamic research that feels almost futuristic, prototypes that look more like science fiction than wartime machines, and thousands of conventional fighters, still dangerous in the right hands. A quiet moment turns into a realization. What do we do with all this? It isn't just abandoned hardware. It's a strategic prize. A secret race is already forming. Even before the ink on Germany's surrender dries, the British want the jets. The Americans want the rocket research. The Soviets want anything they can move east before anyone stops them. The corporal, standing alone beside the strange swept-wing aircraft, has no idea he's staring at the start of that race. But he can feel one thing. Whatever happened here ended fast. Too fast. As if the Luftwaffe collapsed in a single night and left its future on the floor. Far to the east, on another captured airfield, a Soviet officer opens a hangar door and freezes. What he sees will change the balance of post-war aviation. What exactly did he find? An airfield outside Prague. Late afternoon. The sky is low and gray and the ground is soft from days of rain. A Soviet captain named Mikhail Sokolov pushes open a corrugated steel hangar door, expecting another row of wrecked Bf-109s. He stops halfway inside. The floor is clean. The tools are organized. And in the center of the room sits something he's never seen before. A jet. A real one. Its twin engines curve beneath the fuselage. The wings taper in a way that looks unnatural for a propeller-driven craft. The nose houses 430mm cannons. The Germans call it the Me-262, but Sokolov only knows what it looks like. A machine that shouldn't exist yet. Not for another decade in Soviet aviation. He slowly walks around it, glancing at the service tags, still tied to the landing gear. Fresh. Dated only a week before the surrender. The Luftwaffe came close to flying this one again. Out on the runway, another Soviet team fires up a captured generator and tries to crank a Me-163 rocket interceptor. The aircraft jumps with a hiss, then spits out a plume of smoke that sends everyone diving for cover. No one knows how volatile the fuel mix is. They only know the Germans treated the plane like a loaded gun. The Allies are learning fast that not every captured aircraft is safe to touch. Some bases are booby-trapped. Others hide prototypes that never should have been test-flown at all. But the pressure is real. Every minute they wait, another nation might move first. In France, American intelligence officers walk through a warehouse filled with wooden crates stamped with the emblem of the Luftwaffe Technical Office. Inside are engine components, radar equipment, and wind tunnel models that look like scaled-down UFOs. A colonel whispers to his team to photograph everything, crate it up, and get it on the trucks before nightfall. Somewhere across the channel, British engineers examine an Heinkel 162 jet and shake their heads at the design. If this thing had been tested for another 6 months, one mutters. The sentence never finishes. Everyone already knows what he means. The race becomes more intense by the hour. At RAF Farnborough, specialists argue over how to divide the incoming aircraft. Which one should be shipped to America? Which should stay in Britain? Which are too unstable to even attempt flying? Each crate and fuselage could hold a breakthrough or a death trap. The Americans try to play it cool, but their transport crews are already working around the clock. They pull jets out of hangars and load them onto C-54 Skymasters before the Soviets can claim too many. They send engineers to Germany with folders of blank forms so they can requisition anything that looks remotely valuable. Sokolov, back in the Prague hangar, radios his headquarters. His voice is steady, but there's excitement under it. He requests immediate authorization to move the jet east. If he waits, someone else might arrive and dispute ownership. He steps closer to the nose of the aircraft and runs his hand along the cold metal. Rain begins tapping on the hangar roof, and the sound echoes like distant artillery. He doesn't know it yet, but this single Mi-262 will influence the next decade of Soviet jet development. Back in the West, a British lieutenant at a different airfield notices something odd. A set of tire tracks. Fresh ones. And they lead to a hangar the Germans claim was empty. He reaches for the door. What's hidden inside? The lieutenant pulls the hangar door open, expecting dusty shelves and a forgotten tool cart. Instead, a gust of cold air rolls out, mixed with the sharp smell of metal polish. The space is dim, lit only by sunlight slipping through gaps in the roof. At first, he thinks the hangar is empty. Then his eyes adjust. A shape sits under a canvas tarp, low to the ground and strangely curved. The tarp isn't old. It's clean. Someone covered this only hours before the surrender. He steps closer and gives the fabric a gentle tug. The tarp drops to the floor, and the room suddenly feels smaller. Before him sits a prototype unlike any regular Luftwaffe fighter. The frame is smooth, almost seamless. The wings blend into the body, forming a single continuous surface. It looks like a manta ray carved out of steel. A cockpit bubble sits high on the fuselage, giving it a strange, almost futuristic silhouette. It's a Horton Ho 229, a flying wing. The lieutenant circles it slowly, his boots crunching on loose debris. He can't take his eyes off the leading edges of the wings. They're thin, too thin for a wooden prototype. He places his palm on the surface and feels the strange texture beneath the paint. Composite materials, charcoal and resin, the kind that absorbs radar. It dawns on him that this airframe, built in secrecy, was years ahead of anything in Allied labs, maybe decades. Outside, a truck engine roars to life. More soldiers arrive, pulling open neighboring hangars and revealing still more projects the Luftwaffe never got to finish. Half-built fuselages, jet-powered trainers, rocket-assisted takeoff rigs, testing rigs for swept-wing research. Every hidden hangar feels like another chapter of a story no one knew Germany was writing. Hundreds of miles away, American experts walking through a similar complex make a chilling discovery. A stack of documents labeled Sonderkommando, special research units. Inside the folders are sketches of aircraft that never made it off the drawing board, including rough outlines of long-range bombers capable of reaching New York. The war ended just in time. At yet another site, British technicians find a small underground range where German scientists tested remote-controlled aircraft. The Allies study the wiring, the servos, the early analog circuits. The technology is crude, but the idea is obvious. Guided weapons. Decade before they become standard. Bit by bit, a clearer picture forms. The Luftwaffe wasn't simply collapsing. It was dissolving while still holding inventions the world wasn't ready for. And now the Allies had to figure out which of these ideas were brilliant, which were delusional, and which were so dangerous they needed to be erased forever. Meanwhile, Soviet troops moving through eastern Germany uncover a row of wooden crates buried beneath a collapsed shed. When they pry one open, they find jet engine components coated in protective grease. In another crate, they find blueprints for a ramjet-powered interceptor capable of reaching the edge of the stratosphere. None of these designs reach the battlefield, but in the shadow of surrender, the world is now fighting over their remains. The lieutenant, still staring at the Ho 229, radios for officers to come immediately. His voice is calm, but his mind races. He knows this aircraft cannot stay here. The Americans would claim it if they arrived first. The Soviets would take it if they pushed west. The Allies trust each other, but not that much. As he waits, he notices something he missed before. On the far wall, behind a stack of fuel drums, sits another small door, locked, reinforced. If this hangar hit a flying wing, what could possibly be behind that door? The reinforced door isn't large. It looks more like the entrance to a bunker than a storage room. The lieutenant tests the handle. Locked solid. He steps back and waves over two engineers who just arrived with a small toolkit. They glance at each other, then get to work. A few minutes later, the heavy latch clicks open. The room beyond is dark and cold. The smell hits first. Old oil, stale air, something metallic. The lieutenant switches on his torch, and the beam cuts through years of dust floating in the stillness. At the center of the room sits another airframe. Small, sleek, unfinished. It rests on a set of metal trestles. The nose tapers like the tip of a spear. The wings sweep back with a sharper angle than anything they've seen outside of secret Allied wind tunnel experiments. No canopy, no markings, just raw, sanded metal and pencil lines still visible along the fuselage. A label hangs from the support frame, Project 8 to 346, an experimental rocket-powered research aircraft, one the Germans designed to push into speeds no wartime fighter could survive. The lieutenant steps closer and runs a hand lightly along the leading edge. It feels wrong, too thin, too fragile, more a laboratory test article than a battlefield machine. But the ambition is unmistakable. The room holds piles of schematics pinned to the walls, narrow cones, swept wings, charts covered with data from high-speed airflow tests. Someone in this hidden space was trying to solve a question the world hadn't yet asked. What happens when flight breaks a sound barrier? Meanwhile, across Germany, similar discoveries are unfolding. American teams at Lechfeld find an entire workshop stacked with test engines from Me-262, each tagged with handwritten improvements. Another crew uncovers prototypes for vertical takeoff aircraft. British experts at Rechlin find captured Allied rockets sitting beside German ones, dissected side by side. Everyone is realizing the same thing. Germany didn't just lose the war. It abandoned a future that was still in the making. Back in the hangar, the lieutenant turns the torch toward a smaller crate near the wall. It's half open. Inside lies something unexpected, a set of flight goggles, a leather helmet, and a notebook. He lifts it out carefully. The handwriting is tight and hurried. Page after page of calculations, sketches of wings, notes about airflow stability. The final pages stop mid-sentence, as if the engineer fled while writing. The lieutenant closes the notebook and exhales slowly. He knows what this means. The aircraft in the next room, the flying wing outside, the jet prototypes scattered across the field. They're not just trophies. They're pieces of a roadmap, one the Allies must follow, or someone else will. Far away, on a captured U-boat pen along the Baltic coast, an American intelligence officer receives a telegram. It's short, urgent, and it warns him that the Soviets are moving faster than expected. If he wants to secure the next batch of German technology, he has to act tonight, because whatever is hidden, there isn't just another prototype. It's something both sides have been hunting since the first week of occupation, and it's about to disappear. The American officer, Major William Carter, reads the telegram twice. He folds it, slips it into his coat, and walks down the dim concrete tunnel to the U-boat pen. The overhead lamps flicker. Water drips from the ceiling into the dark basin, where submarines once waited for orders that will never come again. His team is already gathered near the far wall, where a narrow service door leads into an old storage wing. A German mechanic, captured days earlier, claimed that something valuable was hidden here, something the Luftwaffe smuggled out of a research center before the Allies arrived. Carter didn't believe him at first. Now the Soviets are coming. He doesn't have time to doubt it. Carter orders 2 men to get the door open. They pry the hinges loose and force it inward. The room is cold, with a thin film of dust covering the floor. Wooden crates line the walls. Some are broken open. Some are nailed shut. Others are marked with painted red letters that don't match any Luftwaffe system. His flashlight sweeps across the labels. Bachem, DFS, Messerschmitt, Sonder, Special Projects. He breaks the lid on one crate. Inside sits a nose cone, polished and sharp, with burn streaks near the tip. He recognizes a shape from intelligence reports, a test article for a high-speed rocket craft. He checks the next crate. Then another. Engine parts, heat shielding tiles, early guidance components. Then he reaches the final crate, the only one bolted shut instead of nailed. It takes them several minutes to get it open. When they finally lift the lid, the air seems to freeze. Inside is a complete cockpit section, not from a production fighter, not from any known jet. A compact pressure capsule with thick glass, reinforced framing and experimental fittings. A tag is still wired to one of the support beams. Hatschgeschwindigkeit for Substrat. High-speed test device. Carter leans in and looks at the construction. The Germans weren't just building jets. They were preparing for flight at the edge of space. He quietly signals his team to pack everything. No photographs. No delays. If the Soviets reach this pen in the next few hours, they'll find nothing but empty rooms and seaweed. Across Germany, operations like this are happening everywhere. At the Nordhausen complexes, the Americans and Soviets practically trip over each other trying to seize rocket scientists. At airfields in Bavaria, British troops rush experimental jets onto flatbed trucks before the Americans can make a claim. The mood shifts from cooperation to polite rivalry. Every discovery matters. Every delay can mean falling behind. Back at the U-boat pen, Carter's men push the crates toward the loading ramp. Their boots splash in shallow water as they hurry. The major checks his watch. Less than an hour until the Soviets' expected arrival. He gives the order. Move. Now! The last crate slides onto the truck. The engine starts with a sputter that echoes across the cavern. As the convoy begins rolling out, Carter catches one last glimpse of the empty room. The dust already settling where the crates used to be. If they hadn't arrived in time, those prototypes would be heading east. But the race isn't over, because in a valley south of Munich, British troops have just uncovered a structure that doesn't appear on any maps. A bunker carved into solid rock. No insignia. No records. No sign of who used it. Only a steel door sealed from the inside. What's behind that door will force the Allies to rethink everything they thought they knew about German aviation research. The steel door sits flush with the rock, cold to the touch and covered in dust. A British sergeant runs his hand along the frame and frowns. There's no handle, no hinges, no markings, just a rectangle of metal sealed tight, like the entrance to a vault someone wanted forgotten. Explosives are the only option. The engineers clear the area, set a small charge, and brace behind a natural outcrop. The blast rattles loose stones down the hillside. When the smoke fades, the door hangs crooked on its frame. The sergeant pushes it open and steps inside. The bunker is silent. The air feels heavy, untouched since the war ended. His flashlight beam moves across the walls and reveals narrow corridors branching in both directions. The place is bigger than anyone expected. They advance carefully. The first chamber is lined with drafting tables. Sheets of paper are pinned to corkboards, layered with sketches of aircraft that never flew. Some are labeled with neat technical notes. Others are just raw ideas, half erased or crossed out. Swept wings, flying wings, canards, ramjets, names of engineers scrawled in pencil. Heinrich Hurdle, Hans Molthaupt, Voldemar Voigt, people the Allies have been hunting. The next room holds scale models, dozens of them. Their shadows stretch across the concrete as the flashlights pass. Sleek delta shapes, tubular rocket bodies, supersonic concepts that feel years ahead of anything flying in the West. One model catches the sergeant's eye. It's long and narrow, with razor-thin wings and air intakes tapered like knife cuts. A note underneath reads, Reichweite, Intercontinental. Range, Intercontinental. The room feels colder after that. They press deeper into the bunker, past a metal hatch that screeches when they pull open. The floor slopes downward, leading into a chamber reinforced with steel beams. At the far end sits something none of them expected to find intact. A full-scale fuselage. It rests on a cradle of welded supports. The nose is sharp. The cockpit sits low. The intakes gape like open jaws. It looks like a jet, but the proportions feel wrong, almost too modern. The tag on the cradle identifies it only as Project Silbervogel, subscale flight test article. The sergeant leans closer. He's seen intelligence sketches of Silbervogel before, the so-called Silver Bird, a theoretical rocket glider designed to skip across the upper atmosphere. Most experts dismissed it as impossible. Yet here stands evidence that Germany tried to build it anyway. One of the engineers whistles under his breath. If this thing ever flew, he doesn't finish the thought. Behind the fuselage, they find racks of research logs. Pages filled with data on heat buildup during high-speed flight. Notes on metal fatigue at extreme altitudes. Equations describing trajectories that don't match conventional aircraft at all. The deeper they look, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just a bunker. It was a testbed for ideas that didn't belong to 1945. They spend hours documenting everything, but the sergeant keeps thinking about one thing. Why was the bunker sealed from the inside? As they prepare to unload the last of the crates, a corporal calls out from a side corridor. Sir, you need to see this. The sergeant follows him into a small room that looks more like a safe than a workshop. A single locked cabinet stands against the wall. They pry it open. Inside is a metal cylinder about the size of a thermos. Stamped on the side is a warning. Nicht öffnen. Hochgeheim Versuchsreihe. Do not open. Top secret test series. Attached to it is a sealed envelope. The sergeant rips it free and opens it. Inside is a single sheet of paper, a short message, a diagram, a signature, and a note that suggests the Luftwaffe was working on a propulsion concept so advanced that even the Allied scientists who later read it will argue for years about whether it was real. The sergeant lowers the paper slowly. He has no idea what he's holding, only that it wasn't meant to be found. But it won't stay hidden for long, because right now, 2 American intelligence convoys are already heading toward Munich. And the Soviets are only a day behind at by the time the first American trucks reach the outskirts of Munich. The roads are packed with convoys from every direction. British teams hauling prototypes. French officers escorting crates of documents. Engineers from the U.S. Army Air Forces carrying engines covered in tarp. No one says it out loud, but everyone understands the same thing. The war is over. The competition has just begun. Major Carter arrives at the British-controlled bunker shortly after sunrise. His jeep rolls to a stop beside a row of parked vehicles, each loaded with equipment stripped from Luftwaffe facilities across the region. The British sergeant who discovered the deep vault steps forward, clipboard in hand. "You're late," he says quietly. Carter offers a thin smile. Traffic. They move inside. The bunker is cooler than he expected. The air still feels thick, like a place that wasn't meant to be open again. The sergeant leads him through the corridors until they reach the main chamber. The moment Carter sees the Silbervogel test article, he stops walking. He studies the fuselage for a long moment. The sleek shape, the nose profile, the way the engineers try to design a craft meant to skim across the atmosphere like a stone over water. "This shouldn't exist," he mutters. The sergeant nods. "But it does." Carter walks around the cradle slowly. He runs a hand along the sharp leading edge. Then he looks at the racks of data logs against the far wall. Hundreds of pages. Equations, temperature readings, programs for high-altitude testing the Allies didn't even know the Luftwaffe attempted. He can't help thinking about the Soviets. If they get here first, the balance shifts, not in months, in days. Outside the bunker, more trucks roll in. Orders get exchanged in hurried whispers. Officers from different Allied units argue quietly over which nation has the strongest claim to which discovery. Every crate holds something that could shape the next decade of aviation, maybe the next century. Carter knows what's coming. The British sergeant knows it too. The alliance is about to split. They walk deeper into the bunker until the sergeant stops at the small safe room. He unlocks the cabinet and reveals the sealed metal cylinder. Carter stares at it for a moment. The warning stamped on the surface is clear. The envelope lying next to it is still unopened. This was sealed before we entered, the sergeant says. My men didn't touch it. Carter sets the cylinder aside and opens the envelope. He pulls out a single sheet of paper covered in meticulous handwriting. The header reads, Entwurf für Neuartigen Antrieb. Concept for a new type of propulsion. Beneath it sits a diagram. Curved intake shapes. A segmented combustion path. Notes about pressure buildup at extreme velocities. Carter frowns. It looks like a ramjet. But not quite. No one here can make sense of it, the sergeant says. We don't know if it's theoretical or something they were actually testing. Carter folds the paper slowly. Either way, it doesn't leave this room. Before the sergeant can reply, one of Carter's men rushes into the chamber. Sir, you need to step outside. They follow him toward the entrance. As soon as they emerge into the daylight, Carter sees what the commotion is about. A line of Soviet trucks is rolling down the far end of the valley. The sergeant curses under his breath. They moved faster than we thought. Carter watches the dust rising behind the convoy, his jaw tightening. He knows the Soviets won't turn back. They're coming for whatever the bunker holds. And they won't let diplomacy get in the way. He looks at the trucks loaded with British and American equipment. Engines, blueprints, test articles, the Silver Bird prototype. Every bit matters. He gives a quiet order. Start loading everything you can onto our trucks. Now! The sergeant hesitates only a second before nodding. The race isn't tightening anymore. It's exploding. And the Soviets aren't slowing down. The valley echoes with the low rumble of engines. Dust curls through the morning air as the Soviet convoy approaches. Each truck packed with soldiers who look ready to push past anyone in their way. Major Carter watches them close the distance. His men are already hauling crates out of the bunker, carrying equipment as fast as their boots will move. The British sergeant steps beside him. They're not slowing down. Carter keeps his eyes on the convoy. They won't. The lead Soviet truck skids to a stop only a few yards from the Allied line. The Soviets dismount quickly, rifles slung across their backs. A senior Soviet officer marches forward, coat flapping behind him, jaw set tight. Major Carter, he says in accented English. We have come to inspect this facility. It is within our agreed zone. Carter knows the zone boundaries well. The whole valley sits in the gray area between American and Soviet claims. And both sides want it. He offers a controlled nod. The bunker is secure. You'll wait until our survey is complete. The Soviet officer's expression cools. That is not acceptable. The British sergeant steps closer, boots planted, hands at his sides. The tension sits between them like a drawn wire. Both groups are armed. Both groups have orders. And neither is going to back down. Behind them, American soldiers roll another crate up the ramp of a flatbed truck. Engines warm. Tarp straps tighten. Someone calls out for more hands. Every second counts. Carter stays calm, but he can feel the pressure building. Colonel, he says evenly, we have materials here that require immediate transport. Safety protocols. Volatile equipment. The Soviet officer narrows his eyes. He doesn't believe it. Not for a moment. He looks past Carter toward the bunker entrance, toward the shape of the Silbervogel test article being pulled toward a truck under heavy canvas. What are you taking from this place? He asks. Carter meets his stare. Captured enemy equipment. Standard procedure. The Soviet officer steps forward until they're only a few inches apart. You will show us, he says, or you will not leave this valley. For a moment, No one moves. Then the sound of a truck engine climbs in pitch. One of the British vehicles pulls into position, blocking the main path to the bunker. A quiet statement. A line drawn. The Soviet soldiers shift their stance. American hands tighten around rifle slings. Carter doesn't blink. "We're leaving," he says quietly. "With everything we loaded." The Soviet officer glances at his men. A single command from him would turn the valley into a battlefield, and yet he hesitates. Not because he wants to, but because he knows the war is over, and no one wants to be the one who lights the match. After several long seconds, he steps back. "This is not finished," he says. Carter nods once. "I know." The Soviet officer gives a sharp gesture, and the Soviet trucks pull aside just enough to let the Allied convoy through. Not far, just enough. A warning in its own way. The British sergeant signals his drivers. Engines roar to life. The line of Allied trucks begins rolling out the valley, tires grinding over gravel, crates strapped tight. Carter climbs aboard the lead vehicle, never taking his eyes off the Soviet officer until the convoy rounds a bend and disappears behind the ridge. Only then does he exhale. They didn't win a battle. They won a head start. As the valley fades behind them, Carter knows this is only the beginning. The prototypes are secure. The logs are safe. The sealed cylinder is now in American hands. But soon, the real work will start, because moving the equipment was the easy part. Understanding it will be something else entirely. And halfway across Europe, at another forgotten airfield, a team of American engineers is about to discover a hidden hangar with something even stranger inside. Something that isn't a plane. Something that isn't finished. Something no one can quite explain. Night settled over the front like a heavy curtain. The crews were exhausted, but the mission window was still open and enemy movement hadn't slowed. Radar stations along the coast began reporting scattered blips drifting inland. Most were decoys, but one track behaved differently. It held a steady course, low and slow, like someone trying hard not to be noticed. The ground controllers pushed the alert through. Within minutes, the crew was back inside their aircraft, running through the checklist with muscle memory. The engines warmed, the cockpit lights dimmed, and the quiet hum of the radar set filled the cabin. It wasn't fear that kept everyone alert. It was the sense that this could be the one encounter they had been preparing for. As the aircraft lifted into the dark, the crew settled into their roles. The pilot kept the nose level against a featureless sky. The radar operator scanned the scope, calling out faint returns that flickered in and out. Nothing stuck. The enemy pilot knew how to hide in the noise. Then a stronger signal appeared. It wasn't a perfect shape, but it held steady long enough to confirm. The crew had a solid contact. The chase began without fanfare. The pilot eased into a climb, feeding small inputs to stay below the enemy's line of sight. The radar operator read the range, counting down as the distance shrank. Every mile felt like an hour. At 400 yards, they finally saw a dark outline through the night haze. It matched the reports. A lone aircraft carrying a heavy load headed toward Allied lines. One accurate drop could do real damage. The pilot steadied his breathing. He waited for the right angle. The moment the sight picture locked in, he opened fire. Tracers cut the dark, followed by a burst that struck home. The enemy aircraft dipped, caught itself for a moment, then spiraled down. There was no explosion, just a dwindling glow before it vanished into the black. The crew didn't celebrate. They only confirmed the loss and returned to their patrol. The night wasn't over, and there were more signals drifting across the radar net. The victory mattered, but staying focused mattered more. For the first time in days, the front line would sleep a little easier. The rail yard stretched below like a spiderweb of steel and shadow. Rows of flatbeds and boxcars were barely visible under the pale moonlight, the tracks glinting where the silver caught the scattered light. Smoke from distant factories hung low in the air, curling into the night sky like dark ribbons. Every corner, every shadow seemed to breathe. The radar operator tapped a series of buttons, narrowing the scan. The earlier bomber had been a warning, an omen. Now the blips on the screen told a different story. Dozens of small, low-speed contacts moving methodically through the yards. Not aircraft this time. Trains. Trucks, vehicles, soldiers moving cautiously, deliberately. The pilot leaned forward. They're moving supplies, weapons, maybe even personnel, too organized for stragglers. The gunner adjusted the sight. His eyes followed the movement on the ground. Everything looked normal, routine, almost benign. But routine could hide danger, and the crew had learned to trust instinct more than appearances. They flew low, skimming just above the tallest rooftops, shadows merging with the terrain. The world below was quiet except for the distant hum of engines and the occasional clang of metal striking metal. They weren't the only ones watching. Somewhere in the darkness, enemy eyes tracked them too, calculating, measuring, waiting. Suddenly, a series of flares erupted from a storage yard. Orange streaks arced skyward, illuminating the rails for brief moments, casting long, distorted shadows. The crew tightened grips on controls and weapons. Every flash revealed new movement. Soldiers scrambling, boxes being dragged, vehicles repositioned. Patterns emerged. Someone on the ground was anticipating an attack. The pilot circled, cautious. Hold position. We need visual confirmation before engagement. His voice was calm, but his knuckles whitened against the stick. Every second counted. One wrong move and the entire operation could be exposed. The gunner squinted. Something in the shadows caught his attention. A large, tarp-covered shape on a flatbed. Its outline was angular, sharp, unlike any standard cargo. He leaned closer. Sir, that's not a standard vehicle. Could be experimental. The radar operator confirmed faint metallic returns. Size and shape match reports from intelligence. Could be a prototype. The pilot's stomach tightened. If it was what they suspected, losing it, or letting it reach its destination, could shift the balance of power before dawn. Prepare to intercept, he said. This is what we came for. Below, the flares continued to flash. Soldiers were moving faster now, sensing danger. The night was about to explode. Every second they hesitated increased the risk the prototype would escape. Every second they acted recklessly could expose them to anti-air defenses. The pilot's eyes locked on the target. The gunner adjusted the sight. The radar operator confirmed the track. The world seemed to pause. Then, from the eastern edge of the yard, a dark shape rose into the air. A second prototype, engines glowing faintly, moving faster than any aircraft they had intercepted before. The crew froze for a heartbeat. This wasn't part of the original intelligence briefing. The pilot whispered, God help us. The shadowed sky above the rail yards held more than just one prize. It held the turning point of the night, the line between secrecy and discovery, between victory and disaster. The second prototype cut through the night like a knife. Its sleek fuselage reflected the faint light of the moon, and a low hum vibrated through the air as it accelerated. The pilot gritted his teeth and pushed the engines harder, feeling the aircraft strain under the sudden burst of speed. The radar operator tracked the target relentlessly, calling out changes in altitude and heading. 2,000, 1,000 dropping, the operator said, voice tight. The prototype wasn't just moving. It was maneuvering with precision no conventional pilot could match. The gunner's hands shook as he lined up the target. Sir, this thing, its speed, the wing shape, it's unlike anything we've seen. The pilot didn't answer. There was no time. Every instinct screamed to intercept before it reached the edge of the rail yards. Below them, soldiers abandoned cover, diving behind vehicles as flares lit the night. The first prototype, stationary on the flatbed, seemed insignificant now. The second one could change everything if it escaped. The crew dove after it. The moonlight glinted off the prototype's nose, making it look almost alive, a predator of the night sky. The pilot banked sharply, following the curve of the rails, the wind buffeting the cockpit with sudden gusts. He could almost feel the heat radiating from the engines ahead. At 300 yards, the gunner fired. Tracers lanced through the darkness, splashing across the fuselage. The prototype shuddered but didn't break course. Its acceleration increased, climbing sharply over the rail yard, gaining altitude at a speed that made the crew's stomachs lurch. Hold on, the pilot muttered under his breath, gripping the controls tighter. We can't lose it. Below, the flares had burned out, leaving the yards in shadows once more. Soldiers paused, unsure whether to advance or retreat. The silence was eerie, broken only by the roar of the engines overhead. The prototype vanished into the clouds, leaving a faint trail of condensation. The radar operator squinted at the screen. It's climbing too fast. I can't hold a fix. The pilot cursed, heart racing. Losing it now meant letting the enemy keep secrets that could outpace the Allies for years. The first prototype on the ground? It would have been nothing compared to what was now escaping into the night sky. Suddenly, the pilot's headset crackled. A voice from another patrol. Major Carter, we got visual, confirmed high-altitude track over Sector Charlie 3, heading northeast. Carter's blood ran cold. It was a prototype, breaking through layers of altitude that most aircraft couldn't even approach. If it reached the border, there would be no stopping it until it vanished into Allied unknown territory. The crew exchanged glances. Every second counted. The chase had become a race against physics itself. Engines groaned. The plane leaned into the wind, and above the moonlit rails, a shadow cut across the stars, daring them to follow. The night had shifted. The Allies were no longer just intercepting. They were racing against the unknown. The prototype surged ahead, cutting through the darkness like a silver spear. The crew's aircraft strained under pursuit. Every vibration, every groan of the airframe reminded them how thin the margin for error had become. Below, the rail yards were a blur, a patchwork of shadow and steel, barely recognizable from their high-speed chase. The pilot, Major Carter, gritted his teeth. He knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another Luftwaffe relic. This was cutting-edge technology, something the Germans had designed in secret, far ahead of any Allied knowledge. If it escaped, it could rewrite the calculations for air supremacy across Europe. Altitudes climbing faster than we can follow. The radar operator shouted, voice tense. We'll lose visual soon. Carter's jaw tightened. Losing it wasn't an option. Not now. Not when every Allied intelligence report pointed to the strategic importance of capturing these prototypes. He pressed the throttle, coaxing every ounce of power from the engines. The gunner adjusted his sight, tracking the sleek fuselage as it pierced the cloud cover. Every flicker of movement across the metallic surface was a promise of speed and danger. The aircraft ahead wasn't just fast. It was almost untouchable. Options? Carter muttered, eyes fixed on the target. None conventional. The radar operator replied, we can either follow and risk losing control, or try and intercept at the next bend in the clouds. Carter considered it for a heartbeat. One wrong move could send them spinning into night, engines screaming and bodies suspended in thin air. But hesitation meant the prototype would reach open skies and vanish. Prepare for high-speed intercept, he ordered. Hold nothing back. The crew tightened their harnesses as the plane dove into the cloud layer. Visibility dropped to almost zero. Instruments screamed warnings. The pilot trusted nothing but instinct and training. Suddenly, a shadow emerged from the clouds below. The prototype was weaving, banking sharply as if anticipating their every move. The gunner gritted his teeth. It's maneuverable. I can't get a clean shot. Close distance. Carter barked. We have to force it into a position. The plane shuddered as they surged upward, breaking through the final layer of clouds. Moonlight hit the prototype directly. Its wings gleamed, aerodynamic perfection in motion. Carter could see the rudimentary markings, but nothing familiar. No serial numbers, no insignia, just a vision of German engineering pushed beyond reason. The gunner fired. Tracers stitched the night, sparking off the fuselage. The prototype wobbled slightly, its path altered, but it didn't slow. Hold on, Carter yelled as the engine screamed at full throttle. The chase had become a battle against gravity, wind, and sheer speed. The sky around them felt alive, almost conscious, responding to every twist and surge of the aircraft beneath them. And then it happened. The prototype made a sudden, impossible maneuver, a vertical climb, almost like it was ripping itself out of the atmosphere. The radar operator shouted in disbelief. It's leaving the standard flight envelope. Carter's heart pounded. This was the moment. One more miscalculation, and the prototype would escape forever. One more perfectly timed maneuver, and they might intercept it. The crew held their positions, senses straining, instruments screaming. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. This wasn't just a chase anymore. This was a turning point. The moment that would decide whether the secrets of the Luftwaffe would fall into Allied hands or vanish into the night forever. The prototype froze mid-climb, suspended for a heartbeat against the moonlit sky, as if testing the limits of gravity itself. Major Carter's plane surged forward, engines screaming. Every control surface pushed to its maximum. The gunner steadied his aim, knowing this might be the only chance to intercept it before it disappeared into the clouds entirely. A sudden jerk in the prototype's flight path brought it within range. The gunner fired, a short, precise burst. Sparks traced along the fuselage. The craft shuddered violently, but it didn't tumble. Its speed decreased just enough. Carter banked sharply and cut in alongside it, matching the impossible velocity. "Now!" he shouted. The co-pilot activated the grapple net, a specialized device prepared for a high-speed recovery. A taut cable shot forward, wrapping around the prototype's fuselage. The aircraft bucked, metal groaning, but the net held. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, with a shudder that rattled the cockpit, the prototype stabilized. Its vertical climb slowed to a controlled glide. The crew exhaled in unison. The chase was over. The prototype had been captured. They guided it toward an isolated Allied airfield, the engines whining, sparks occasionally licking the tether points. Ground crews were ready, lights blazing against the darkened tarmac. Within minutes, the prototype was secured inside a reinforced hangar, tarps covering its delicate surfaces. Carter stepped out, heart still hammering, and surveyed the craft. The design was beyond anything he had ever seen. Sleek, aerodynamic, and meticulously engineered, it represented years of secret Luftwaffe innovation. The markings were almost irrelevant. The real value lay in the engineering, the technology, and the data that accompanied it. Inside the hangar, engineers began their work immediately, taking measurements, documenting every panel, every rivet, every unique system. Carter watched as a realization settled over the team. The Luftwaffe had been years ahead of Allied aviation. Jets, ramjets, vertical climb tests, all of it hidden until the very last days of the war. And then came the sealed cylinder, the envelope Carter had secured weeks earlier. Engineers cautiously opened it. Inside were the schematics for a propulsion system unlike anything in the Allied arsenal. High-altitude, high-speed flight, capable of reaching stratospheric altitudes. The room fell silent. Every scientist and officer present understood the implications. This wasn't just another captured plane. This was the blueprint for a new era in aviation. Carter looked at the prototype, and the documents spread across the tables. He knew one thing with absolute certainty. The war had ended, but the race to the sky had only just begun. Outside, the night remained quiet. But for Carter and his team, nothing would ever be the same. They had captured history in motion, and with it, a glimpse of the future.